My name is James Edward Carter, but the guys in my unit called me Jimmy. I was 19 years old when I became a sniper, barely old enough to shave, but old enough to hold a Springfield M1903 steady at 400 yards. December 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Most people know it as the Battle of the Bulge, but for us, it was just hell frozen over. I remember the cold more than anything else. It wasn't just cold, it was the kind that crept into your bones and made your fingers too stiff to pull a trigger without warming them in your armpits first. We were supposed to be part of a reconnaissance patrol, 7 men from the 99th Infantry Division sent to scout enemy positions near the village of Rocherath. "Carter, you see anything through that scope of yours?" Sergeant Daniel Hayes asked, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. He was 32, from Detroit, and had a wife and 2 daughters waiting for him back home. He showed me their picture once, 2 little girls with matching blonde pigtails. I pressed my eye against the scope, scanning the tree line ahead. Snow covered everything like a burial shroud. "Negative, Sarge. Just trees and more trees. Keep looking. Intelligence says there's a whole damn Panzer division moving through this sector." Behind us, Private First Class Tommy Alvarez was trying to light a cigarette with shaking hands. He was from El Paso, Texas, and never stopped talking about his mother's tamales. "Man, what I wouldn't give for some hot coffee right now. My toes feel like they're gonna fall off." "Shut it, Alvarez," Corporal Marcus Freeman whispered harshly. Freeman was from Alabama, a quiet guy who barely spoke unless he had something important to say. When he did talk, everyone listened. Sound carries in this cold. Our patrol included 3 others, Private Robert "Bobby" Sullivan from Boston, a kid who lied about his age to enlist at 17, Private Henry Chen from San Francisco, our radio operator who could fix anything electronic, and Private Walter Schmidt, the oldest at 41, who'd volunteered despite being exempt due to his age. We'd been moving for 3 hours when Chen suddenly froze, holding up his fist, the signal to stop. He pressed his headset closer to his ear, his face going pale. "Sarge," he whispered urgently. "Command is calling for immediate withdrawal. German forces have broken through our lines. They're everywhere." Hayes crawled over to Chen. "Where? How close?" 3 miles south. 5 miles east. "They're saying," Chen's voice cracked. "They're saying we might already be behind enemy lines." That's when I heard it through my scope's narrow field of view, the distant rumble of engines. I tracked left and felt my stomach drop. Through the gaps in the trees, I could see them, German infantry, maybe 2 dozen, moving in a skirmish line directly toward our position. "Contact. Infantry, 12 o'clock, 300 yards and closing," I reported, keeping my voice level even though my heart was hammering. Hayes made a decision in seconds. "Fall back to that farmhouse we passed. The one with the stone foundation. Move quiet, move fast." We retreated through the snow, each step carefully placed to minimize sound. The abandoned farmhouse appeared through the trees, a 2-story structure with thick stone walls on the ground floor and wooden walls above. The windows were broken, the roof partially collapsed, but the stone foundation was solid. It had probably stood there for 100 years. Now it would be our fortress. "Schmidt, Sullivan, secure the ground floor. Chen, get that radio working. I need to contact battalion. Freeman, Alvarez, upstairs. Find positions with good sight lines. Carter, with me." Hayes and I moved to the 2nd floor, where I found a window facing south with a clear view of our approach route. I set up my rifle, using an old table as a rest. The M1903 felt familiar in my hands. I'd fired it so many times in training that it felt like an extension of my arms. "How many rounds you got?" Hayes asked. 60. Plus what's in the rifle. Make them count. Below us, Chen's voice drifted up the stairs, tinny and desperate. Home plate, this is Scout 7. We are surrounded and requesting immediate extraction. Over. A pause. Static. Home plate, do you copy? Over. More static. Home plate, this is Scout 7. Does anyone copy? Over. The silence that followed was heavier than the snowfall outside. Hayes closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, his voice was steady. All right, listen up. The radio's dead, could be the weather, could be German jamming, doesn't matter. No one's coming for us tonight. We have ammo, we have shelter, and we have each other. We hold this position until the lines stabilize or until we can make a break for our own forces. How long? Bobby Sullivan asked. His voice hadn't finished changing yet. He looked even younger than 19. Hayes met his eyes. As long as it takes, son. Through my scope, I watched the German patrol approach our abandoned position. They moved cautiously, weapons ready. An officer, I could tell by the way the others deferred to him, examined our tracks in the snow. He pointed directly at the farmhouse. They know we're here, I said quietly. Then they'll come for us, Hayes replied. And when they do, we'll be ready. As night fell on that first day, we took turns on watch. The temperature dropped even further. Outside, we could hear them, German voices in the distance, the clanking of equipment, the occasional burst of gunfire from other skirmishes in the forest. I was on watch around midnight when I saw the first probe. 4 German soldiers, moving carefully through the snow toward the farmhouse. They stayed in the shadows, using the trees for cover. Smart. Professional. I lined up my shot on the lead soldier, my finger resting gently on the trigger. But I didn't fire. One shot would give away my position and tell them exactly how many of us were armed and where we were situated. Hayes had taught me that patience was a sniper's greatest weapon. They approached to within 100 yards, then withdrew. Testing our response. They'd be back with more men and a plan. Day 1, I whispered to myself, marking it mentally. 6 more to go. But I didn't know that yet. None of us did. We just knew we were surrounded, cut off, and alone. And somewhere out there in the darkness, the enemy was planning their next move. Freeman appeared beside me, his dark face barely visible in the moonlight. You think we'll make it out of here, Jimmy? I thought about lying, about giving him false hope. But we'd been through too much together for that. I think we're going to fight like hell to find out. He nodded slowly. That's good enough for me. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering our tracks, covering the evidence that anyone had ever been here at all. Inside the farmhouse, 7 American soldiers prepared for the longest week of their lives. Day 2 began with gunfire. I was shaken awake by Hayes at 0530 hours, my body stiff from sleeping on the wooden floor with only my coat as a blanket. The cold had seeped so deep into my bones that it took me a full minute to stop shivering enough to hold my rifle steady. They're forming up at the tree line, Hayes said, his voice low. 24, maybe more. Looks like they're getting ready to test us properly this time. I moved to my window position, peering through the scope. The early morning darkness was just beginning to fade, and in that gray light, I could see them, German soldiers assembling in organized groups about 400 yards out. An officer was directing them, pointing toward different sections of the farmhouse. They're going to hit us from 3 sides simultaneously, Freeman observed from the adjacent window. He'd been a hunter back in Alabama before the war. He understood tactics like this. They'll pin us down from the front while sending flanking units around the sides. Hayes gathered us all in the center room. We looked rough, unshaven, exhausted, our uniforms crusted with frost and dirt. Bobby Sullivan's lips were turning blue from the cold. Walter Schmidt moved slowly, favoring his left knee. But everyone's eyes were alert, focused. Here's how this works, Hayes began. They outnumber us, but we have superior defensive position and better sight lines. Carter, you're our primary shooter. You pick your targets carefully, officers first, then anyone with a radio or special equipment. Everyone else, you fire only on my command. Understood? We need to make them think we have more men than we do. What about ammo conservation? Chen asked, adjusting his glasses nervously. We use what we need to survive today. Tomorrow's problems can wait until tomorrow. Hayes looked at each of us in turn. Remember your training. Controlled bursts. Aim for center mass. And for God's sake, keep your heads down between shots. The attack came at 0600 hours. The Germans opened with a sustained burst of machine gun fire that tore chunks out of the farmhouse's wooden upper floor. I pressed myself flat against the floor as splinters and plaster dust rained down on me. The sound was deafening, a continuous roar that made thinking almost impossible. Carter. Find that machine gun. Hayes shouted over the noise. I crawled to the window, staying low, and brought my scope up just far enough to scan the tree line. There, a two-man MG-42 team positioned behind a fallen log, maybe 350 yards out. The gunner was feeding ammunition while his partner fired. They were good, disciplined, keeping their bursts short to avoid overheating the barrel. I steadied my breathing, placed the crosshairs on the gunner's upper chest, and squeezed the trigger. The M1903 kicked against my shoulder. Through the scope, I saw the gunner jerk backward and go still. The machine gun fell silent for maybe 5 seconds before the assistant gunner took over. But 5 seconds was enough. Hayes leaned out and fired 3 quick shots with his M1 Garand, and the second German went down. Good shooting, kid. Alvarez called out from across the room. But there was no time to celebrate. The Germans were advancing now, using the covering fire from their remaining positions to move forward in short rushes. I could see at least 20 of them, maybe more, working their way toward the farmhouse in pairs and small groups. I worked the bolt on my rifle and found another target, a soldier carrying what looked like a satchel charge. Explosive. If he got close enough to throw that at our foundation, he could bring down half the building. I led him slightly, accounting for his movement and the wind, and fired. He crumpled. Contact left. Freeman shouted, and opened fire with his M1. They're trying to flank. The next 20 minutes were chaos. We fired and repositioned, trying to cover all approaches to the farmhouse. The Germans were professionals, they moved with precision, used cover effectively, and never gave us easy targets. I went through 15 rounds, each shot carefully aimed, each one counting. An officer directing his men. A soldier with a radio pack. Another one setting up a mortar position. Every time I fired, I thought about what Hayes had said, make them count. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The Germans withdrew, dragging their wounded with them and leaving 4 bodies in the snow. We'd held them off. But the cost was evident immediately. I'm hit, Bobby Sullivan said quietly, almost apologetically. He was sitting against the wall, his hand pressed to his right shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark and steady. Hayes and Chen rushed over. Hayes carefully pulled Bobby's hand away and examined the wound. A bullet had gone through the fleshy part of his shoulder, missing bone and major arteries by inches. You got lucky, kid, Hayes said, though his face was grim. Clean through and through. Chen, get the medical kit. We had 1 field medical kit between 7 men. Chen cleaned the wound as best he could with our limited supplies, then wrapped it tightly with gauze and a compression bandage. Bobby bit down on a piece of leather to keep from screaming. His face went white and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold, but he didn't cry out. When it was done, he leaned back against the wall, breathing hard. How you doing, Bobby? I asked. Been better, Jimmy. Been worse too, I suppose. He tried to smile but it came out more like a grimace. At least I got a good war story now, right? The best ones, Walter Schmidt said, kneeling beside him, are the ones where you survive to tell them. You just focus on that part. Hayes pulled me aside. How much ammunition you got left? 45 rounds. We can't take many more assaults like that. And they know it. He looked out the window at the German bodies in the snow. They'll be back tonight or tomorrow. With more men. Better prepared. What about breaking out? Freeman asked, joining our conversation. We could move at night, try to infiltrate through their lines. Hayes shook his head. With Bobby wounded? In this cold? They'd run us down in an hour. No, our best chance is to hold here and hope our lines advance. The bulge can't last forever. Eventually, our forces will push back. Eventually could be a long time, Sarge, Alvarez said. He'd been listening from his position. We got food for maybe 3 more days if we ration. Water's not a problem, plenty of snow. But ammo. We use what we need to survive, Hayes repeated firmly. That's all there is to it. Day 3 was quiet. Too quiet. We took turns on watch while the others tried to rest or warm themselves by the small fire we'd built in the stone fireplace downstairs. We couldn't risk much smoke, but a little heat was better than none. Chen spent hours trying to fix the radio, but whatever was wrong was beyond his ability to repair with the tools we had. Could be a broken antenna, could be a damaged crystal oscillator, he muttered, frustrated. Could be the Germans are jamming every frequency. I just don't know. That night, Walter Schmidt told us about his family, his wife Martha, his 2 sons who were too young for the draft, his hardware store in Milwaukee. When I get home, he said, staring into the small fire, I'm going to take my boys fishing. Spend a whole week at the lake, just the 3 of us. No war, no killing. Just fishing. You think about stuff like that a lot? Bobby asked from his makeshift bed. His fever had broken, but he was still weak. Every day, son. Every single day. It's what keeps me going. Freeman nodded. My little sister's getting married in April. I promised her I'd be there to walk her down the aisle. Our daddy died when we were young, so it's got to be me. He looked at his hands. Can't let her down. Alvarez grinned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm going to eat my mama's cooking for a week straight. Tamales, enchiladas, pozole, everything. Not going to leave the table except to sleep. What about you, Jimmy? Bobby asked. What are you going to do when you get home? I thought about it. I was 19. I'd left for basic training right after high school. I'd never had a real job, never had a serious girlfriend, never done much of anything except be a soldier. I'm going to figure that out, I said finally. When I get home, I'm going to take some time and figure out who I want to be. What I want to do. Maybe go to college on the GI Bill. Maybe buy a piece of land somewhere quiet. Hayes smiled slightly. That's a good plan, Carter. A real good plan. Day 4 brought snow. Heavy, wet snow that reduced visibility to almost nothing but also made any German assault nearly impossible. We used the time to reinforce our positions, using furniture and debris to create better firing positions and cover. Chen finally gave up on the radio. It's dead, Sarge. I'm sorry. You did what you could, Hayes replied. That's all anyone can ask. Day 5 was when the hunger really started to hit us. We'd been rationing our K rations carefully, a half ration per man, twice a day. It was barely enough to keep us functioning. My stomach felt like it was eating itself, and I could see the same hollowness in everyone else's eyes. How much food left? Hayes asked Schmidt, who'd been managing our supplies. Enough for 2 more days at current rationing. Maybe 3 if we cut down to 1 meal a day. Cut it down, Hayes decided. We don't know how long we'll need to hold. That night, I was on watch when I heard it, the sound that would change everything. Footsteps. Not the organized movement of soldiers. Not the cautious approach of a patrol. Just footsteps. Walking. Steady and deliberate, crunching through the snow outside. I pressed my eye to the scope, scanning the darkness. The moon was full, reflecting off the snow, providing just enough light to see. And then I saw him. A single German soldier, walking directly toward the farmhouse. No weapon visible. His hands were raised above his head. He was alone. "Sarge," I whispered urgently. "You need to see this." Hayes came to the window and looked through his binoculars. "What the hell?" The German soldier stopped about 50 yards from the farmhouse and called out in accented but clear English, "Americans. I wish to speak. I have no weapon. I wish to speak about your surrender." Hayes and I exchanged glances. Freeman joined us at the window. "It's a trick," Freeman said immediately. "Has to be. They want us to show ourselves, get a count of our numbers." "Maybe," Hayes said slowly. "Or maybe they're getting tired of losing men trying to dig us out. Maybe they want to negotiate. Or maybe," I added, looking through my scope at the surrounding darkness, "he's bait, and they're waiting for us to show ourselves so they can take us all out at once." The German soldier called out again. "I will wait here for 5 minutes. Then I return to my lines. Talk with me, Americans." Hayes made a decision. "Schmidt, Alvarez, cover the other windows. Freeman, keep your rifle on him. Carter, you too. If this goes bad, take him down first, then scan for shooters." He took a deep breath. "I'm going to talk to him." "Sarge," I started to protest. "That's an order, Carter. If we can end this without more bloodshed, we have to try. For Bobby. For all of us." Hayes moved down to the ground floor. I tracked him through the broken window, then shifted my scope back to the German soldier. He stood perfectly still, hands still raised, completely vulnerable. Hayes opened the farmhouse door slightly and called out. "I'm listening. Say what you came to say." The German soldier's voice carried clearly through the cold night air. "You fight well, Americans. You have cost us many men. But you are surrounded. You have no escape. No rescue is coming. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. You will live. This I promise." "And if we don't surrender?" Hayes asked. "Then tomorrow, we bring artillery. And tanks. And we reduce your farmhouse to rubble. And you all die. This is certain." He paused. "You have fought with honor. There is no shame in survival. Think of your wounded. Think of your men. You have until dawn to decide." With that, the German soldier turned and walked back toward the tree line, his hands still raised. No shots were fired. He disappeared into the darkness. Hayes came back upstairs. His face was troubled, lined with exhaustion and the weight of command. "So," he said quietly, looking at each of us. "We need to talk." The silence that followed Hayes's words was heavier than any gunfire we'd endured. "He's offering us our lives," Chen said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. That's something, right?" "The Geneva Convention," Schmidt added, though his tone was uncertain. "They're supposed to follow it. Supposed to treat POWs humanely." Freeman shook his head slowly. "You want to bet your life on supposed to, Walter? We've all heard the stories. Not every German unit plays by the rules. Some do, some don't. And we got no way of knowing which kind we're dealing with." But we do know what happens if we don't surrender, Alvarez said. He looked exhausted, his face gaunt from hunger. Tanks. Artillery. They turn this place into dust, and we die. That's guaranteed. Hayes sat down on an overturned crate, his M1 Garand resting across his knees. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked old. Worn down. Bobby, you get a vote in this too. You're wounded. Your situation's different from the rest of ours. Bobby Sullivan was propped against the wall, his face pale in the moonlight filtering through the broken window. His shoulder was wrapped in blood-stained bandages, and every breath looked like it cost him. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. I didn't lie about my age and leave Boston just to spend the rest of the war in a prison camp, Sarge. Whatever you all decide, I'm with you. But I don't want to be the reason anyone else dies, either. If surrendering keeps everyone alive, I won't be the one to say no. That's mighty brave of you, son, Schmidt said quietly. Hayes looked at me. Carter? You've been quiet. What do you think? I'd been staring out the window, my rifle resting in my arms, watching the darkness where the German soldier had disappeared. I thought about everything we'd been through. The cold. The hunger. The fear. The brotherhood that forms when you're 7 men against an entire army, when you depend on each other for every breath you take. I think, I said slowly, that I didn't come all the way to Europe to surrender to the first German who offers me a deal. I think we've made them pay for every yard of ground, and they're offering terms because they don't want to pay anymore. That means we have power here, Sarge. More than they want us to know. Power? Chen laughed bitterly. Jimmy, they have tanks. We have barely enough ammo for one more firefight. That's not power. It's not about the ammo, Freeman said, understanding dawning on his face. It's about what we represent. Every day we hold this farmhouse, we tie up German forces that could be somewhere else. We're a thorn in their side, disrupting their operations. That German didn't walk up here out of kindness. He walked up here because we're causing problems they can't afford. Hayes nodded slowly. Freeman's right. If they just wanted us dead, they'd have already brought up the heavy weapons. The fact that they're offering terms means something. Maybe their supply lines are stretched. Maybe they need those men and weapons elsewhere. Maybe they're lying, Alvarez interrupted, and this is all just psychological warfare to make us waste time arguing instead of preparing for their next assault. Maybe, Hayes admitted. But here's what I know for certain, if we surrender, our war is over. We become prisoners, and whatever happens after that is out of our control. If we keep fighting, we control our own fate. We choose when, how, and if we die. That means something to me. It means something to me too, I said. I vote we fight. Freeman nodded. Fight. Schmidt took longer, but eventually he said, fight. For Martha and my boys. I'm going home to them, not to some prison camp. Alvarez sighed deeply. My mama's going to kill me for this. But yeah. Fight. Chen removed his glasses and cleaned them with shaking hands. I'm terrified, he admitted. But I trust you all more than I trust them. Fight. Everyone looked at Bobby. The 17-year-old kid from Boston who'd lied about his age to serve his country. He was wounded, feverish, running on nothing but stubborn teenage willpower. He should have been the first to want safety, medical care, a chance to survive. He looked at each of us in turn, then smiled, a real smile this time. Well, I didn't come all this way to miss the ending. Fight. Hayes stood up, and somehow he looked younger now, energized by the decision. All right then. We fight. But we're going to be smart about it. They'll come at dawn expecting an answer. We'll give them one they won't forget. The next hour was spent in careful planning. Hayes had been an engineer before the war, and his tactical mind went into overdrive. They expect us to either surrender or hunker down and wait for their assault. So we do neither. We go on offense. He sketched a rough map in the dust on the floor. There's an old drainage ditch that runs from behind this farmhouse toward their western position. Remember, we saw it on day 1. It's filled with snow now, but it'll provide cover. You want to attack them? Chen asked, incredulous. I want to hurt them where it counts, Hayes corrected. Their command post, their supply dump, their communications. If we can create enough chaos, they'll have to pull back to reorganize. And when they do, we slip through the gap and make for our own lines. That's insane, Alvarez said. But he was grinning. I love it. We spent the remaining hours of darkness preparing. Hayes, Freeman, and I would make the raid. Schmidt and Alvarez would stay behind to create the illusion that the farmhouse was still fully defended. Chen would stay with Bobby, keeping him warm and watching for any sign his wound was becoming infected. If we're not back by noon, Hayes told Schmidt, you surrender. You get Bobby to a hospital. No shame in it. Understood? Schmidt gripped Hayes's hand. Understood. But you better come back, Danny. Your girls need their father. At 0500 hours, 3 hours before dawn, Hayes, Freeman, and I slipped out the back of the farmhouse and into the drainage ditch. The snow was deep, up to our chests in some places, and the cold was so intense it felt like knives in my lungs with every breath. But the ditch provided cover, and we moved slowly, carefully, using the darkness as our ally. It took us an hour to move 300 yards. My whole body was numb with cold by the time Hayes signaled a stop. Ahead of us, through the pre-dawn gloom, we could see it, a German command post set up in the ruins of a barn. Lights. Warmth. Officers moving about. And parked nearby, 2 armored vehicles and a supply truck. There, Hayes whispered, pointing. Those vehicles are what they were planning to use against us. If we can disable them. I can do better than disable them, Freeman whispered back. He held up 2 grenades. Got these left. If I can get one into that supply truck's fuel tank. Hayes considered for a moment, then nodded. Carter, you're Overwatch. Anyone comes to investigate, you drop them. Freeman, you've got 5 minutes. In and out. I'll cover your approach. I set up behind a fallen log, my rifle trained on the command post. Through my scope, I could see German officers studying maps, drinking coffee, looking warm and comfortable. They had no idea we were there. Freeman moved like a ghost, slipping from shadow to shadow. He was almost invisible in the darkness. I watched through my scope as he reached the supply truck, carefully pulled the pin on the first grenade, and wedged it against the fuel tank. Then he was moving again, back toward our position. He was 10 feet from safety when a German soldier stepped out of the barn to smoke a cigarette. Time seemed to slow down. The German looked right at Freeman. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened to shout. I fired. The German dropped without making a sound. But the gunshot echoed across the compound, and suddenly everything was chaos. Germans poured out of the barn, shouting, grabbing weapons. Someone was yelling orders. Run! Hayes hissed. We ran. Behind us, the grenade detonated. The supply truck's fuel tank exploded in a massive fireball that lit up the night sky. The explosion set off a secondary detonation, ammunition stored in the truck, and suddenly the entire German position was an inferno of flames and exploding ordnance. We didn't stop running until we were back at the farmhouse, gasping for breath, our hearts pounding. Behind us, we could hear shouting, sirens, chaos. The German position was in complete disarray. Did you see that? Alvarez was laughing hysterically from the window. It's like the 4th of July back there. They're running around like ants. Hayes grabbed the binoculars and scanned the German positions. A slow smile spread across his face. They're pulling back. Moving their wounded. Trying to reorganize. This is our chance. Our chance for what? Chen asked. To go home. We moved fast. Bobby was wrapped in every spare piece of clothing we had and supported between Schmidt and Alvarez. We left the farmhouse from the north side, moving through the chaos and confusion of the German retreat. Fires still burned in the distance. Men were shouting orders. No one was paying attention to 7 American soldiers slipping through the forest. We moved for 3 hours, taking turns carrying Bobby when he couldn't walk anymore. The sun rose, cold and pale, over the frozen forest. And then, through the trees ahead, we saw them. American soldiers. A whole company of them, moving forward, retaking ground that had been lost. Hold your fire. Hayes shouted, raising his hands. Friendly. We're friendly. A young lieutenant approached cautiously, his carbine trained on us. Identify yourselves. Sergeant Daniel Hayes, 99th Infantry Division. Scout Patrol, 7 days overdue. The lieutenant's eyes widened. 7 days? Behind enemy lines? More or less, Hayes said tiredly. Sir, we have a wounded man who needs immediate medical attention. Within minutes, we were surrounded by friendly faces. Medics rushed to Bobby, examining his wound. Someone handed me a canteen of water. Someone else gave me a chocolate bar. I tried to eat it, but my hands were shaking too badly. You boys did good, an older captain said, clasping Hayes on the shoulder. Real good. We'll get you back to battalion, get you cleaned up, fed, and debriefed. You're safe now. Safe. The word felt strange. Foreign. After 7 days of constant threat, constant fear, constant vigilance, my body didn't know how to process safety. We were loaded into trucks and driven back to a field hospital. Bobby was rushed into surgery. The rest of us were given hot food, clean clothes, and real beds for the first time in a week. I ate until I couldn't eat anymore, then slept for 14 hours straight. When I woke up, Hayes was sitting by my bed. How's Bobby? I asked immediately. He's going to make it. Infection was starting to set in, but they caught it in time. He'll be shipped stateside for recovery. War's over for him. Hayes smiled. He'll be home for his 18th birthday. That's good. That's real good. The rest of the boys are fine. Tired, hungry, but fine. We all made it, Jimmy. All 7 of us. I sat up slowly, my body aching. I heard footsteps, Sarge. That night, when the German came to offer terms. That's when I knew. Knew what? That we were going to make it. Because footsteps mean someone's alive. Someone's moving. Someone's still fighting. As long as we could hear footsteps, ours or theirs, it meant the war wasn't over. It meant we still had a chance. Hayes was quiet for a moment. That's a good way to think about it. I'm going to remember that. You think we did the right thing? Not surrendering? I think, Hayes said carefully, that we made a choice based on what we believed was right. We trusted each other more than we trusted the enemy's promises. And that trust brought us all home alive. So yeah, Jimmy. I think we did the right thing. 3 months later. The war in Europe ended in May 1945. I was there when American and Soviet forces met at the Elbe River. I was there when the newspapers announced Germany's unconditional surrender. I survived the war with 3 minor wounds, a Purple Heart, and memories that would last a lifetime. Hayes made it home to Detroit. His daughters were waiting on the porch when he arrived, just like in the photograph he'd shown me. He wrote to me once, saying he couldn't sleep well anymore, but every morning when he woke up and saw his girls, it made every nightmare worth it. Freeman walked his sister down the aisle in April, just like he'd promised. He sent me a wedding photograph, him in his dress uniform, his sister in white, both of them smiling like the war was a million miles away. Alvarez got his week of home cooking. Then another week. Then he used his GI Bill to open a small Mexican restaurant in El Paso. He named it Siete Hermanos, 7 Brothers. Chen became an electrical engineer and worked on some of the first computers. Schmidt went back to his hardware store in Milwaukee and never missed a single one of his son's fishing trips. Bobby Sullivan recovered fully. He went to college, became a teacher, and never told anyone he'd fought in the war until his students found his Purple Heart in his desk drawer 30 years later. As for me, I used my GI Bill to go to college. Studied literature. Became a writer. And every year on December 16th, the anniversary of the day we were surrounded, I think about that farmhouse in Belgium. About 7 men who chose to trust each other over the easy way out. About the footsteps that meant we were still alive, still fighting, still hoping. People ask me sometimes what war taught me. I tell them it taught me that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about staying human. Staying connected to the people beside you. Choosing hope even when hope seems foolish. We were surrounded for 7 days. And then I heard footsteps, ours, moving forward into an uncertain dawn. Together. That's the sound of survival. That's the sound of brotherhood. That's the sound of home. James Edward Carter, 1988.